Welcome to the channel, and today we're going to be taking a closer look at the three branches of government. Of course, we have the executive branch, legislative branch, and judicial. One word that I'd like you to know is ratified. Last lesson we talked about the ratification of the Constitution. Ratified means given formal approval. It means it is now the law of the land. They approved it, and so this is our new government, the Constitution. It is a brilliant constitution, is a brilliant form of government. Um, make sure that nobody can become too powerful. I mean, president, you think he's like a king? Nope. A lot of things that can stop him from doing things. So, for instance, let's take a look. President gets to choose who helps him. People, these advisors are called a cabinet. People like Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, they're in charge of parts of the government to make sure that it runs well. Remember, the executive branch executes the laws. They're charged with carrying out the laws that the legislative branch passes. So they're the ones that are going to head up departments that deal with defense, justice, trade, education, money, environment, everything. Okay. Uh, they make sure that the laws of the nation are enforced. Okay. Any laws that come out of the legislature, they make sure that people are following them. And then when we talk about the Supreme Court, right here, well, where did these people come from? The president picks the Supreme Court. However, it has to be approved by the Senate and the legislature before they can get to the Supreme Court. President is the commander in chief of the armed forces. He gets to tell the army what to do. However, he cannot declare war. Congress is the only one that can declare war in another country. The president makes treaties with other countries. However, the Senate has to ratify those treaties. He can't just go around making treaties and that's it. The Senate has to approve those treaties. So you could see here that he gets to do a lot of things. However, he relies on other parts of the government to make sure that they go through. So they have to work together. Legislative branch is called Congress and made up of two separate houses. Remember we talked about this last time. Senate, every state has two senators. Doesn't matter how big the state is. And then the House of Representatives, the bigger states get more votes. In the Senate, they serve a 6-year term, so they get to stay in the Senate longer, whereas in the House of Representatives, it's only a 2-year term right over here. So they get elected much more frequently than the Senate. And that is by design. These are supposed to be closer and more receptive to the people, whereas the Senate is supposed to look out more for the states, the state of the country, and so forth. And so they get a 6-year term so they can just focus on that instead of trying to do exactly what the people want. The founders were very sensitive that, yes, the people, we're trying to represent the people, but sometimes the people can uh, get a little bit out of hand when it comes to certain policies. They don't see the full picture. That people definitely need to be representative, but there needed to be a balance to make sure there's no mob rule or, you know, people just ganging up on other people. So that's why we have that set up there. They both write laws for the country and decide if it becomes law. Senate's vote on treaties and with other countries and on new federal judges. Remember we talked about that with the executive branch. Executive branch nominates judges, they nominate other cabinet members, and the Senate has to approve them. And then, of course, treaties. The president forms treaties with other countries, and then the senators have to approve it. Then we get to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court is not elected by the people. These people serve as long as they want. There's no term limits. They don't get voted in. They have to wait until the president decides that they're good enough for it, and the Senate has to approve it. So these two branches of government decide what goes into this branch of government. But it's a very powerful branch. They serve as long as they want. And then they have one person who's a Chief Justice who presides over, kind of like what we talked about George Washington presiding over the Constitutional Convention. And then they hear cases, they interpret the laws that Congress passes, and if they feel that a law that the Congress passes goes against the Constitution, they declare it unconstitutional, and that law is basically null and void. So judicial branch can have a lot of power. Um, but they have to be, they're supposed to be the final arbiters, make sure that these other branches are doing what they're supposed to be doing according to the Constitution. They can't just make stuff up. They have to use the Constitution to justify what they say. So if the Congress is passing laws that go against the Constitution, for instance, if they want to stop internet use because people are saying bad things about the government, well, then they go to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court says, hey, First Amendment rights, that's in the Constitution. You can't take that away. And so they strike down the law, and that law is gone. So a very powerful branch there. However, they rely completely on the Senate and the executive for being appointed there. They have to be very careful of who they put in there, but they have full control over who goes into the Supreme Court. Okay. Now let's take a look at the checks and balances, some examples here. So let's say the Congress sets up a law that they like, and the president doesn't like it. The president gets to veto the law. Okay, so that law, no good. I don't like it. I'm not going to sign it. Um, it's not going to be a law. So that goes back to the Congress. Now, the law is dead unless Congress can get 2/3, which is a lot of people. I mean, it is really hard to override a veto, but Congress has the power to override a presidential veto if the law is really, really good that so many people say, no, no, this is a really good law, Mr. President. We're going to override your veto. Okay? So that's the checks and balances. Yes, they can pass whatever they want. The president can veto. He can say, no, no, I don't think that's a good idea. It's not going to work. And if Congress cannot get 2/3, then the law is dead. But if they do get 2/3 of Congress, then it doesn't matter what the president says, it's law. Okay. Another example, president picks a justice for Supreme Court. It has to go to the Senate, and then if the Senate agrees with him, then that justice gets to go on the Supreme Court. Otherwise, his picks are erased. They're no good. And then finally, we have the judicial branch. They decide if the laws agree with the Constitution. So if the Congress makes a law that's against the Constitution, then they can strike it down. Likewise, if the president does something that goes against the Constitution, let's say he starts shutting down newspapers because he doesn't like what they're writing about him, the justices can say that he's acting outside of the Constitution and they get to tell him to stop. Okay, now here's the thing. The judicial branch, they don't have any police force. How are they supposed to get rid of, let's say a president is out of control and they decide, this president is shutting down newspapers and he's totally out of bounds of the Constitution. And then the president says, you know what are you going to do about it, Supreme Court? You can't do anything. Well, then the Congress can impeach and remove the president from office. So uh, if two branches of government gang up on the other one, then the Constitution will win out. The Constitution basically encourages that if somebody is out of line, if these any of these branches are stepping out of bounds, the other two have the power to stop the other one. So they all have to work together, otherwise there's going to be problems, and the one branch that's out of line will start to um, have trouble. So that's just one example of how the Constitution works, and make sure that we don't have anybody that's too powerful. It's a brilliant system, and we will go into it further with the amendment process tomorrow. But right now, you just need to remember the executive branch carries out the laws. They get to do all the things that executes the laws, including hiring the people that they need to execute the laws, like cabinet members, advisors, um, and they get to pick the judges, but they need the legislature to approve the judges. Legislature makes the laws. Um, Senate has 2 senators. Doesn't matter population. House representative. We went over this yesterday. 6 years for the senators, 2 years for the representatives. And then Supreme Court, lifetime appointment. There's no 2 years, 6 years. They could go as long as they want. Oh, one other thing. President, 4-year terms. Okay, president can go into office and serve 4 years, and he can do that twice, he or she. We haven't got a woman president yet. at the time of this video. However, anyone that wins the presidency can run for 2 terms, and they last 4 years each. Almost forgot that. Good thing I got that in there. And then the justices down here, they get to decide if any of these branches are working outside of the Constitution, and they could strike down laws or they can stop the president from doing things that are outside of the Constitution. Okay, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time when we talk about the Bill of Rights.